So today I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Amir Hussain, a visionary in the realm of artificial intelligence and a trailblazer in cognitive computing. As a founder and CEO of Spark Cognition, Amir has been at the forefront of advancing AI technologies that are reshaping industries and our lives. He's not only an accomplished entrepreneur, but also an esteemed author, having penned The Sentient Machine and his latest insightful work, Generative AI for Leaders. And I got both of them here. Beyond his professional accolades, I'm honored to call Amir a very, very dear friend. Amir's passion for innovation is matched only by his deep understanding of transformative power of AI. Please join me in welcoming a true pioneer in AI, Amir Hussain.
It's wonderful to be with you, Khurram.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Amir, for taking the time. Since in the interest of time, we'll just jump right in. I do have a few questions for you, Amir. Um, would love to have it more like a casual discussion
Sure.
or any way you like. So the first one, Amir, please tell us about your journey in the field of AI and how have you seen AI evolve since you entered the field?
I've been in love with computer science since forever, but with artificial intelligence, I really seriously started working in the field in my teens. And early on, one of the first publications in the field that I did was with an IEEE publication, Systems Man in Cybernetics. And I was like, I think maybe 15 or 16 years old when that paper was published. And it was focused on a distributed learning environment and how you could essentially monitor the skill level of people interacting with computer systems and how you could adapt interfaces, so multimodal interfaces, based on an assessment of how expert an individual was. So there was lots of embedded elements, like for example classification based on free-form user input, and then actually changing interface elements dynamically on the fly to account for the user's level of sophistication. Um, I also was very interested in fuzzy systems. I looked at the work of Lutfi Zadeh and Bart Kosko. Bart Kosko had written a very, very popular book on the topic of fuzzy systems, which really caught my attention. Also, in those teen years, I came across the work of Doug Leonard, who recently passed away, God rest his soul. He was based here in Austin and worked on Psych, which was basically a Lisp-derived system for creating rule sets about common sense. And his idea was that, common sense was a million facts, and then he expanded that to 10 million facts, and Psych became one of the longest running experiments in the field, lasting really over 40 years. So these were some of the early exposures that I had to artificial intelligence, but then also neural networks. Early on, I had a deep fascination for these. In the early 2000s, Bill Gates started talking a lot about Bayesian networks and how they were showing tremendous results, where initially Microsoft Research had started to integrate those into some of Microsoft's products for voice recognition and so on. So I've been in this field for a while, and have built systems using numerous different paradigms, all the way from ILP, inductive logic, rules-based system, fuzzy systems, to obviously neural networks and the deep learning revolution that took place somewhere around 2011, 2012, which has been really at the heart of all the systems that Spark Cognition has built.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. As you were describing it, I was thinking that maybe a system like Psych could be used to reduce the hallucinations in the LLMs today. So it will be a fascinating discussion in its own right. Um, so Amir, the topic of your latest book is generative AI, and that is the sort of the theme of today. Especially since ChatGPT was introduced earlier in the year. So can you talk about generative AI and how is it different from prior forms of AI? Because you've seen it all in the
Yeah.
last 30 years or so.
Well, first of all, artificial intelligence is a field of endeavor that looks to build systems that are so smart that they do what human beings previously did. And that definition, which is kind of an operating definition of AI and has been for many years, is a tricky one because the moment machines start doing something, people look at that act and they say, well, this was always kind of mechanistic. So it's kind of it's almost a moving target. Um, Now, if you look at generative AI, it's something that now has a very specific name. And just to be clear, eh, that name kind of sets it apart from discriminative AI. And discriminative AI is where you look at a data set and you figure out the patterns in that data set, and then you use that for identification of new samples in one of the categories that you found in that data set. So you might say, again, bird or mammal or reptile, horse or cow, dog or cat, that kind of thing. You discriminate. With generative AI, really what we're talking about is the kind of artificial intelligence that produces new creative examples of a thing. So where it's been extremely successful has been with LLMs or these language models like ChatGPT, where you talk to it and it seems to give you answers which are novel and unique. But that's not the only form of generative AI, because you can also use it to create pictures. So a lot of you might be familiar with DALL-E or Mid-Journey or things like that, which produce images. And the idea is, again, you're providing a prompt and you're having the system then generate an image. But if you think about generative AI as the kind of AI that produces new examples of something, let's say new designs, well, the same gentleman, Doug Leonard, who worked on Psych, also worked on automatic theorem provers and also worked on systems that were able to identify designs in semiconductors and VLSI. And in fact, in the 80s, he had a system that came up with, it was called Eurisco, EURISKO, that came up with a 3D junction design in VLSI that was extremely efficient and hadn't been developed by human designers previously. So in some sense, it was a net
Wow.
new novel design within semiconductors. That was also an example of generative AI, meaning that you had generated something new using artificial intelligence that previously didn't exist. So all I want to say with this is that the notion of using artificial intelligence to create new things is not new. The techniques that are becoming extremely popular and the systems that have brought it to the forefront, yes, those are new and they've become far more effective. But this idea of using computers, using artificial intelligence to create new designs and ideate and create new pictures and create music and create text, this is not new. And the techniques that are popular today should be set aside and should be looked upon independent from the idea, because the idea will always exist and the techniques might change and the techniques might continue to improve.
In terms of business, because your book is primarily for generative AI for leaders, not just business leaders, but others as well. Where do you think the most significant impact of generative AI on businesses across different industries would be?
Yeah. So I'm going to say a few things that a lot of people might not like, but I think if you deeply sort of think about them, you'll find that these are probably unpleasant truths, but they are truths. So within the narrow realms of work, because there's a lot to a human being, right? A human being is not just a job. But if you evaluate the skill sets of a human narrowly within the confines of a job, my view is that LLMs are smarter than 60 to 70% of the people that doing a certain job. And so, if you think about it in those terms, and you think about many of the tasks that are given to people in those fields, LLMs, generative systems can do a pretty darn good job. And what that means is that one of the biggest inputs that through the beginning of economics, and you mentioned early on that you and I have been friends for a long time. I know that your passion for computer science is perhaps even matched by your passion for economics. So, even in basic terms, if you think about labor and capital and land as the inputs that go into an economic good, the production of an economic good, for the longest time, labor has been the driver there. But I think what we're now talking about is capital, the ability to buy machines that are smart, replacing labor. So, in economic terms, this is really a twist that is unique in the history of economics, of man, of civilization. And on the technological side, tangibly for technology companies and other companies, what it means is that much of what uh, is in an organizational workflow can be mechanized. Now, I'm not suggesting that that means that there's no opportunity for people to do other things, and so that's not what I'm saying. But the current workflows can be mechanized to such a degree that you really de-link them from labor to a large extent, and that has to be transformative for businesses and industries and companies. And really, you've got to understand how that's happening, which is why I wrote this book. The idea that leaders need to understand this shift and they need to look at it in a very tangible way. So the structure of the book is all about that. Like, what is generative AI? Uh, how, in what areas can you use it? There's lists of like dozens and dozens of things within your company that you can do today with generative AI. What kind of an organization do you need to have? What type of a structure? What type of roles do you need to think about? These are the kind of tangible things that a leader needs to know about in order for them to look at their workflows, look at their products, look at their day to day jobs with the lens of how can I optimize them with this new technology.
What I found really interesting in the book is the level of detail. So it's not just the theory, but it goes into exactly the types of tools that are available, the list of them, what type of team do you need, a product manager, you still need a developer, you still need a UX designer, you still need those, and then where does generative AI and LLMs come and play a role in the middle? And how can you improve your operations, your support and development and so on and so forth. And also you talk about the risk associated with AI. And so it's a very comprehensive book. I was surprised at how you can get it to such a small number of pages, which is quite an achievement.
Yeah, and the reason for that was because I didn't want to make it a book of theory. I didn't want to get into each topic and explore it to a level of depth that I would lose my audience, which in this case is not programmers, even though many programmers might want to know how their organizations might think about their art, generative AI. But really, this is for people that don't have all the time in the world, but need to have a good enough structural understanding of the thing to be able to get into it. So yeah, I mean that's I wanted to keep it compact.
Excellent. Yeah, it's the somebody could read it in a couple of days. But the most importantly, what I liked is that you could always refer back to it. So when you're in a particular context and you want some advice, you can just always pick up the book, go to the right section, and go with it. So can you talk a little bit about and share your thoughts on the current state of AI regulation, and what policies do you believe are crucial for responsible advancement of generative AI? And this is, that President Biden recently created proposed a regulation. I know in Europe there is a lot of work going on there as well. There are two camps. One, they say that it's premature. There shouldn't be any regulation. We haven't spent enough time with generative AI to even know the pros and cons for it. The other camp says that we have to build it from the beginning, otherwise it'll be too late. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Maybe I'm too cynical, but my view is that the people doing the regulation know so little about the actual field that the hope of regulation being informed by logic and knowledge is low. I also think that whenever you get into regulation, you start attracting a lot of vested interests. that try and use traditional political mechanisms to turn the conversation in a way that advantages them, but overtly looks as if it's very, it's just selfless. So if you look at this recent letter that was written about a pause, asking for a pause on generative, and let's implement a moratorium. This very recent, very public letter. Many of the signatories, many of the very, very famous signatories of that letter, you would expect to at least self-enforce that moratorium, right? But it turns out that one of the very significant signers of that letter just launched their own generative network, the exact same
Right.
thing that they were criticizing or asking for a moratorium on. This is just one very recent example. From this type of technology regulation, I can pick out so many examples of where it's a very convoluted and not a very clear process driven by, just sort of uh, ulterior motives cloud the whole thing. That happens a lot. And then the people that are eventually passing the regulation don't really know what they're doing. My view is that in general, the technology moves much, much faster than politics and regulation, just across the board. It takes so long for there to be a consensus on these types of things that something like AI at the speed it's moving, I just don't think there can be right regulation on it. I think what should be regulated is not AI, but what should be regulated are the end uses and in the way that they end up being, marketed. So let me give you an example. This whole debate has been going on for years on the topic of autonomous weapon systems. What do you exactly? So, thing is, there are already the rules of war. Okay, one of them is, for example, proportionate response. Okay, so what you have to do there is, if you have an autonomous weapon system, then it has to comply with the rules of war that already exist. An autonomous weapon system must be compliant with, for example, the requirement for proportionate response. And that's where the existing rules, which are at a higher level, they're at a kind of a logical level as to what should happen, no matter who is executing the action. The action needs to be compliant with X, no matter whether it's a human or a machine executing the action. That to me is much more important. So, for example, if you're using an LLM to spread some kind of news or rumor or false information or some kind of a threat, the issue is not what you are using to spread that information. The issue is the output is illegal. So whoever has implemented that bot, that task, whoever has initiated that, should be held to account. I mean, if you go back and you say you can't build LLMs that tell lies, to me that's pointless. What does that even mean? If you tell lies, there is a penalty under the law. And whether you use an LLM to tell a lie, or whether you directly tell a lie, or whether you hire thousands of people in a low-income destination in what's called a troll farm to lie, it shouldn't matter. What should matter is what you're doing. And if what you're doing is illegal, then there you go, So my view is that people that don't understand technology trying to regulate technology, not a good idea. You should just think about the outcomes and regulate the outcomes, no matter whether technology or individual effort is used to achieve those outcomes.
And also the regulation tends to favor the incumbents, and also it becomes generally it's very vague, um, and you could selectively apply it to anything. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, Khurram, how does regulation get passed? You've got a political process. And in that political process, you got a lot of money involved. And who has the ability to spend that money? The incumbents. So trying to act as if that doesn't exist, that there is no money in politics, that there are no vested interests driving regulation, I mean, it's disingenuous. We know from almost every field where regulation exists that regulations have often been created to disadvantage a new, a new kind of class of competitor from taking over or moving forward. And many a times, whether it's the tobacco industry or other industries. They have used their revenue, they've used their riches to protect themselves. So regulation can go either way, and I just think that in technology, things moving this fast, hard for me to see how you're going to have meaningful regulation. Also, the people pushing these letters and regulation, they do the exact opposite of what they're asking the world to do.
Thank you so much, Amir. It was lovely talking to you. Looking forward to meeting again next week.
I look forward to it.